Wow.
Yes. So good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our virtual event, Solidarity with Asian Americans during COVID-19. My name is Kaelea Lucas. I am an African-American woman. I have, I guess, big curly hair and glasses. And I am the community organizer for Resources for Independent Living here in Sacramento. I'm just gonna be sharing a bit of logistics before tonight's discussion, just to set the tone for things. I'm really thankful for everyone who has come out. This is a very important discussion for us to have. The people on this panel really understand what it is like to live at sort of this intersection of different identities. And by taking the time to really listen, we can broaden our understanding on how to be a good ally and make our community a better place for everyone. Yeah. So before we get started, let's discuss a bit of those logistics. Today's webinar will be captioned, and you can turn on the captioning on and off with the CC button that's located along the bottom of your screen. We also have ASL interpreters, and you can go ahead and pin them on your screen to keep them in view. This just means that they'll stay at the top of the people that you're viewing so that you can always see the interpreter. We will be taking questions at the end, and you can use the Q&A box to ask those questions along the bottom of your screen to submit your questions or submit them in the chat box as well. There is also an option to raise your hand, but we do want to reserve that for people who are unable to use the chat box or the Q&A portion. If you do need to raise your hand for any reason, if you have Windows, you can do that by pressing Alt+Y on your keyboard to raise or lower your hand. If you have an Apple, you can use the Option +Y on your keyboard. And if you're over phone, you can press star and dial 9. So today's panel will be recorded and posted on our Facebook tomorrow. So if you are speaking or on camera, I wanted you to know ahead of time so that you're prepared to be on camera. And last but not least, just a couple more housekeeping things before I get started. Since we do have captioner and interpreters, it does help when you slow down your pace. I know for myself personally, it's really hard to slow down, but as the ASL interpreter said earlier, she said that pausing after each sentence can help that a tad bit. As well as I would like anyone who is speaking to describe themselves however they feel comfortable. This just gives a chance for everybody to really be able to, participate in every form of, I don't know how you look. Yes, thank you. So this event is scheduled to run until 7:30, and we'll start with an opening remark from our executive director here at Resources for Independent Living, April Dawson, and then we'll move on to the panel. Starting with some panelist introductions, then jump into the panel questions. Finally, at the end, there will be a little bit of time for Q&A. Again, I'm very grateful for everyone here, and before we jump in, I do want to give April that chance to introduce herself.
Okay.
Give her a warm welcome.
Thank you. Well, as Kaelea mentioned, I am Dawson, Executive Director for Independent Living. My pronouns she, her. It's just disappeared. They are she, her, and I am a woman with blonde hair, and I'm wearing a green keyhole top and have brown eyes. I want to start by thanking the United Way California Capital Region for partnering with us on this third installment of an intersectionality and disability series. I want to thank Kyla, Aquino, Irving for being our moderator this evening. Kyla and I have been personal friends for many years, and we were both youth delegates to a leadership conference when we were in high school. And it's been really beautiful to see how her career has grown over the years. And as she mentioned before we got started, I'm not going to let her leave the disability world. I keep pulling her back in because she's so talented. And I also want to thank Kaelea, who is our community organizer, who is really fearless and really hardworking, and who really is the heartbeat of these webinars, and who puts everything together and really makes it look easy. So we at RAL, we believe in attracting really great talent, and Kaelea is one of the talents that we've attracted, and I'm really proud to have her on our team.
Oh my gosh.
And Resources for Independent Living has been around for over 40 years. We have been advocating and providing resources for the disability community in Sacramento and Yolo counties since 1976. And COVID-19 really caused us to really take a hard look at our mission and to really think about how we were showing up for the community. And one of the things that we have been talking about is how can we approach our work with a racial equity lens and really show up during this time when people with disabilities' voices are being silenced. So I am really proud that we are here tonight. I want to thank our panelists in advance for your vulnerability and for sharing your stories. And I cannot wait to hear your truth spoken tonight. And as I've mentioned before each of the 3 webinars we've done on intersectionality, I want to say that, you know, this is not a one and done for us. We are really committed at RIL to looking at how we can strengthen the way that we show up in our community. So I'm really proud that all of you are here tonight, and I am looking forward to this wonderful discussion. Have a good evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, April. That did remind me, I forgot to share my pronouns as well. My pronouns are she, hers. Yeah, that's it. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Kyla again. As April has said earlier, Kyla has helped me plan the last 2 of these events as well, the intersection of Black and Disabled, which can be found on our Facebook as well as YouTube page. And she has just been so much of a lovely, partner to work with, as well as a friend. We have so many great conversations. So I am so honored that she is moderating tonight. And also, before I stop talking as well, I do want to thank all of the panelists, all of the interpreters, and the captioners, because y'all are the ones who make this event possible, as well as the audience as well. I really do appreciate all of you, and I'm just so grateful, because it's so important that we have these conversations in our communities, plural, because this is what progress looks like. This is exactly what progress looks like, and this is what the hard work looks like. So I just want to thank you everyone for being here, and I'm going to pass it off to tonight's moderator, Kyla. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaelea. I'm really excited about this evening. Like I said, my name is Kyla Aquino Irving. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a Filipina woman with short, shoulder length, dark black hair and brown eyes. I am the communication and marketing manager at United Way, California Capital Region. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of our interim CEO and president, Amber Lovett. She couldn't be with us tonight, but she wanted me to convey that United Way has been in this community for almost 100 years. And in those 100 years, we've really looked at how to support the community in ways that really work. And so the who we've been has not changed, but the how we're approaching these issues is definitely shifting. And I love that, it's a 100-year-old operation, and yet they're nimble enough to switch gears and really listen to the community rather than assuming what the community needs. So I'm really proud that doing these conversations is really part of who we're growing to become. And that's an organization that really checks in on the community and works in partnership. So I hope that we'll be in touch with all of the different communities involved tonight. And I look forward to doing more in-person collaborations as well as online as the world returns. With all of that, I just want to give a brief bio of my experience. I was born in the Philippines, and I came here as a 2-year-old. And when my kidneys stopped working when I was 15, my family was just beside themselves because they had no clue how that happened. And we weren't familiar with navigating the medical system here. And so we came from a culture where you don't question your authority or your medical, professionals who you're working with. And yet my mom had this mother's intuition, I'll call it that, to really ask more questions, dig deeper, and demand better for me. And it's shaped who I am as an American, is to question and to demand better for yourself. Since we came from privilege in the Philippines, but came here to quickly see that because of what we look like and what our last names sound like, you're not always treated with the same kind of care that someone else does here. So I'll just start off with that. That growing up with that experience and having a chronic illness growing up has taught me how to assert myself and how to navigate the medical system that isn't always built for someone who's not familiar with looking at forms or asking for different treatment options and the like. So I'm excited because the people on our panel are folks who are, from what I've seen, advocates in their own right, and all have very different stories to share. So I will start with our first panelist. We've got Raymond Kwong. Welcome, Raymond, from Disability Rights California. I will let you go ahead and introduce yourself. If you don't mind describing yourself, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. So my name is Raymond Kwong. I am a Chinese-born American. I have short-ish black hair. It's getting long now. I have glasses, and I'm wearing I believe this is blue button-down shirt. Quick introduction. I was born in Hong Kong, and I came to the US when I was 11 in the year 2000. I was born with a visual disability, Leber's congenital amaurosis. So what that really means is that I'm legally blind, so I do have some residual vision. I always like to tell people that I have enough vision to get in and out of trouble. When I don't know how long this is supposed to go for. Sorry if I ramble.
No, go ahead.
When I first came here, both my sister and I both are visually impaired, both have the same visual disability. So when we came here, obviously the language barrier was a huge obstacle for both of us. My parents didn't speak language, and navigating special education was trial and error. Mm-hmm. I remember going to Francis Bland, which was a school for the blind at the time. I think it's closed now. And trying to figure out what services that my sister and I could get, what we could ask for. It like I said, trial and error. We were lucky that we had a teacher's aide who spoke our language to kind of help us kind of through the process. But we didn't know any better until both my sister and I got older. I distinctly remember when I was in middle school that I had to translate for my own IEP, which now I know that that's not supposed to happen.
Wow.
So I would say that my passion working at Disability Rights California and learning everything that's available to people with disability is I want to somehow let immigrants' family know. It doesn't matter if you're from if you're API or Latinx, wherever you're from, you don't speak the language when you first came here, that you know what services you can have access to, and make sure that language barrier isn't a big obstacle for you to access services.
Awesome. All right, moving on to our next speaker is Priscilla Yeung. Am I saying your name right, Priscilla? At the Society for the Blind.
Yes, hi everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is my first time in this space, and I'm really excited to learn from everybody that's here. My name is Priscilla, and I work at the Society for the Blind, and currently I just received a new job title, and I'm manager of the senior program. So I help serve older adults who are losing their vision, 55 and older, and brand new to the position, but just really enjoying it. So my pronouns are she and her, and just a little visual description. I have straight hair, dark brown hair, dark brown eyes, and I'm wearing a pink dress, I think. So anyways, I lost my vision due to optic nerve atrophy as a teenager, and that was a really trying time because as a teenager I'm dealing with all sorts of different changes and insecurities, and so to also lose my vision during that period of time, and really not knowing the resources available to us, as a family was really hard. And I think, you know, for me being in, you know, the Asian culture as a Chinese American, there was a lot of shame involved in disability, around disability. I remember my grandma telling me that, you know, if, you know, I couldn't go out like my other cousins could because I had a cane. And so if my cane touched somebody else, that they would also go blind. And so that really made an impression on me, that my disability was something to be ashamed of, to be hidden, and that I myself needed to be invisible. And so I sort of went through life, you know, feeling that way, and not speaking up for myself, not knowing, you know, what this world could offer me, and really didn't have many dreams for myself that I could contribute, and didn't have a voice. And so until I met other people at the Society for the Blind in my 20s, and I thought, wow, they're doing things I just dreamed of doing. And these are simple things like crossing the street, or, you know, getting a job, or going to the grocery store, you know, things like that. And so ever since I met them and realized that there's so much more, and that really we need to change the narrative of, you know, our cultural narrative, for one thing, of, you know, disability being something that we cannot overcome or being ashamed of, you know, changing those narratives, and to be able to continue the conversation so that we can make, you know, change for those around us with disabilities. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing. I'm so excited to get into this. All right. And our third, last but not least, someone I call Kuya, which is Tagalog for big brother, Bobby Dalton G. Roy, with the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation.
Thank you so much, and good evening. Thank you to RIL and United Way for having me. My name is Bobby Roy. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I am a bald, bearded, cisgender Filipino man wearing clear-framed Ray-Ban glasses and speaking in front of a plain white wall. I am zooming in from unceded Plains Miwok lands, now known as Sacramento, California, and to whom I promise that my words, deeds, thoughts, and actions will be honorable to them. I also dedicate tonight to my mom, uncle, and Lola, who, while no longer occupy this physical plane, always remind me to lead with love and service. I was a caregiver to all three of them, my mom and uncle who fought the same leiomyosarcoma cancer, and my Lola who advanced through Alzheimer's dementia in her advanced age. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much. Well, let's get into it. I am so excited. All right, so the first question can be a loaded question, so let's all take a breath. The first question is, what has been your experience through the pandemic? And we can either go in the order that we were introduced in, or if someone's burning and ready to speak, you can feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead.
This is Raymond. I'll start. So during the pandemic, mainly, I think what brought it up for me, what kind of stood out in my mind is everything that's been happening in the news recently with all the violence against Asians. I myself, as far as I know, because I'm kind of oblivious to things that are kind of around me. I don't. If people give me looks, I can't tell. But however, when I go out with, you know, my sighted girlfriend, she would say that, you know, people would give us looks. It could be lots of different things why they could be looking at us in particular. It could be that because I'm Asian. It could be because she's Jewish. It could be that I'm blind. It could be that because she's in a wheelchair. But it's something, to me, I haven't experienced anything. But when I talk to my sister and my parents, I'm more concerned for them. So my sister actually she used to work at the Lighthouse for the Blind, San Francisco. And one of the news, one of the I guess, attack that happened was right around the corner from where she was. So I was talking to her, and she was mentioning that she was getting a taser for self-defense, and I was thinking to myself, like, this is strange. This shouldn't be happening. I understand that, you know, for self-defense, she has to feel comfortable going out at night, but I never thought I would hear. I never thought I would hear that. It just seems, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it in words. It seems odd that it has to leave it to things like this shouldn't be happening in the first place.
Right.
That's what I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And then when it comes to my parents, because they are older, in their, I think in their 60s now, if I remember correctly, and they understand English. They know enough that they can, you know, do that job and everything. But I don't know if, unless very out there, if it's over to, like, I don't know, prejudice or racism, I don't know how they will react, or I'm concerned for their safety because they do live in the area, and I don't know, there's a different feeling running in my head, and I hope that it unfortunately it takes something like this to bring, you know, prejudice and racism against API, you know, to the service.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it doesn't go away. That needs to be, it still needs to be talked about. It just doesn't go away after all the bad things.
Right.
Thank you, Raymond, for sharing that. This is Priscilla. You know, I think the part of me that identifies with being Asian, and all this anti-Asian, you know, rise in anti-Asian violence and all that stuff, I feel very vulnerable, you know, as a Asian woman, and as an Asian blind woman who, you know, I've worked hard at learning how to travel and navigate my environment, you know, using the cane and overcoming the fears of vision loss, and safety and the ability to navigate. You know, it took a long time I remember times when I couldn't travel independently. And so now as an adult, I'm able to do that more. But even though I'm using a cane, I'm getting out there, but I still have fear inside of me. And the fear isn't necessarily because of my vision loss anymore, but it's more because I'm Asian and identify as an Asian woman. So that vulnerability has just come about this year. I've never felt that way before. And so I think that has been a change for me. And so as a response, I am taking self-defense, you know, and martial art, and trying to, you know, just, you know, got my orange belt, so I'm very excited. But, you know, I about, you know, how to equip myself, because I'm not sure how to approach it and what to do about it. And then I think also, you know, speaking about the older generation, I work with older adults who are blind, and I run a support group for Asians, you know, older adult blind Asians. And I've spent a lot of time, you know, prior to all this pandemic, you know, working with them on how to travel independently with their cane, and how to, you know, have a different message for themselves that's different than what their cultural message is, so that they can get out there and do their grocery shopping, go on walks. But now, since the pandemic, I mean, you know, through COVID, you know, with the fear of getting COVID, but also because of the rise in anti-Asian hate and violence, they tell me that they don't want to go out anymore and to travel. So we spent all this time helping them to be independent, but it's not the vision loss that's keeping them from getting out there. It's the fear, the other fears that come from what we're experiencing recently.
Wow.
So it's interesting times.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both for sharing. I echo everything that both of you shared. The worry for, you know, ourselves and our families and our friends. I personally live in South Sacramento, specifically the 95823 zip code, and I've lived there for 37 years in the same childhood home. And it has had the highest number of COVID-19 cases in Sacramento County for the entire pandemic. And as a result, right, what we we're seeing, myself, a few Asian and Pacific Islander community members and allies recognize that the system was ill-equipped to protect us because of decades of disinvestment in public health and in the systems that actually create safety for us. So we had to rally together and circle the wagons. We put together a grant program for emergency funding, a community-based testing site, even a vaccine distribution site, along with other communities that we live in and next to. Because as APIs, we don't only live amongst APIs, we're also among our Black and brown and white neighbors as well, and indigenous neighbors. And the thing is that for us APIs, what we realized is that we were facing three lethal pre-existing conditions for coronavirus. One was racism, two was economic inequality, and three was the health insecurity, right? And even though we've heard that we're all in this together and it's become a rallying cry during the pandemic, really the reality is that the magnitude and the nature of the impact has been anything but universal. I'm going to also talk a little bit about our mental health crises that's coming up. It's increased for everyone. And not all communities were prepared to respond accordingly. And I have to take the time to point out that state-sanctioned violence against our communities, which particularly led to the murders of Christian Hall, a Chinese American in Pennsylvania, and Angelo Quinto, a Filipino American in Antioch, California, who were both experiencing mental health crises, were killed by law enforcement, right? And so I think all of those things, all of that worry, all of that stress is turning into toxic stress, toxic concern, and just those are the type of things that I've been seeing and witnessing in others and in myself as well during the pandemic.
Thank you for sharing. Whew. Well, luckily the next question will hopefully lead us to a more positive place from where we've been in the last year. My request is that we please share your vision for solidarity in our community. Raymond, do you want to go first? And this doesn't have a wrong answer. This could be whatever you envision.
I can go first if that's all right.
Sure.
So for me, my vision for solidarity, and as was introduced, I'm part of the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation, and we talk about solidarity a lot. I'm also part of Service Employees International Union, which focuses on care work, right? We care and we serve others. And in the union movement, it's all about solidarity. And as a Filipino, my vision for solidarity is rooted in these two things. One is an indigenous concept, an indigenous Philippine concept of kapwa, and of that solidarity concept that's in unionism. So my grandmother's older brother was the first person in our family to immigrate from the Philippines to Hawaii in 1918, and he worked in the sugar and pineapple plantations where he was part of the union. And one of the things, the concept of kapwa means connecting myself with others, feeling myself in the other, and having a sense of shared identity and a shared inner self, right? And that sense of common human identity, community, and inner self, that destiny lies deep in our psyche. So it's really the translation in our particular culture and history of that universal truth that at our innermost core, we have a shared humanity. And what happens, we always have to ask what happens when we're not in right relationship with ourselves, with other individuals, with other communities and groups. And what if we learned how to engage the other in respectful confrontation? As far as solidarity informed by unionism, solidarity gets thrown out a lot, but the way I learned about solidarity is that it's not just a feeling of vague compassion or shallow distress at misfortunes of other people, but it's really a firm and persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good. And that means to the good of all and of every individual, because we're all responsible for one another. And I want to remind you, like Ashley Woodard Henderson reminded me, that solidarity is actually our inheritance, that winning is also our inheritance, and that this relationship between communities of color is also not new. And we're not going to be the first, the last, or the only people to be building these kind of relationships moving forward.
That's awesome. Thank you, Bobby.
Bobby, you just put that, this is Priscilla. You just put that so eloquently, and
It's a tough act to follow, I'm sure.
Write that down. but I definitely I want to echo what you said. Definitely not as eloquently as you, but I think what I've learned through this pandemic is to find my voice. I think for such a long time, being Asian and always, maybe not wanting to speak up, being shy, or always feeling I need to consider others, has really caused me to stay in a box. And so I think all this new upheaval, in a way, has kind of shaked things up a little bit and helped me to rethink, that I have value too, and we have value, right? And so our voice matters, and what we say does matter. Our stories matter. And so I think being able to have that belief in ourselves, first and foremost, and rethinking, maybe what in our culture, how we're brought up, maybe I want to set that aside and just really take a good look at, maybe I don't need to be like that. Maybe I could step out of my box and try something different and share my story and share my voice and have the courage to do so. I think is a really good first step. And then being willing to see the other person, as a fellow human being, just kind of what Bobby said, and just see the humanity in each other. And to be able to share honestly and openly, to learn to ask questions together and to really hear each other.
Excellent points.
I agree with both Bobby and Priscilla. Especially when it comes to saying our voice matters. I had something better in my head, but I just lost my train of thought. Kind of go back to what my work actually been doing is that we have the employee resource group where we have I myself is in the employee resource group of Aspire, which is basically for all our API staff. We have all the API staff gather to basically be able to talk amongst ourselves. We're in a safe environment, way to be vulnerable. And the most recent, I can't remember when this was, but the most recent news with the anti-Asian violence happened. That's when the whole agency kind of pulled together with the other employee resource groups, with Latinx, LGBTQA, and so on. All the employee resource group kind of came together and drafted statements and posted onto our website. And to me, that's what solidarity is. Everyone, all people of color, or all underserved communities, what have you, everyone come together. And going back to the news again, with all the terrible things all the unfortunate things that have been happening, there are some good ones that I have seen, and it just makes me feel good. There was one where an API family was being harassed in their neighborhood, and the neighborhood stood up and kind of stood watch for them, and that makes me feel good inside. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy. To me, that's what solidarity is. You know, if you say something that's not, you see something that's not supposed to be happening, you know, even if it's just a little bit, do your part, whatever that may be. So it was another webinar on Stop Asian Hate that was put on by Asian and Pacific Islander with Disabilities of California, where one of the panelists actually mentioned bystander training. I think that's what it's called. I can't remember. I could be remembering wrong. But basically, if you see something, you know, someone being, you know, anyone really being harassed for their race, their gender, religion, what have you, you know, you should be able to do something, you know, just little things, not like putting yourself in danger, you know, just distract them or misdirection or what have you. Just do every little bit helps. For me, I don't know what I can do, but I will volunteer for any and everything that that is available to me. I think I'm rambling now, so I'm just going to stop.
You know, if I could add, Raymond, I know that there's a website that was recently created called stopapihate.org. You can report hate incidents on the spot. I just looked it up from my phone. So that's one resource we can share. And you don't have to be API to use it. Obviously, you see something, you can say something. So thank you. Moving on to our next question. How can allies of the API community help? Again, this is for whomever. And also, I invite people on the chat box. If you want to chime in, we can read your responses as well.
This is Priscilla. You know, I don't really know if I have like the end all be all answer to this question. I think it's a really big question. And I feel like the first part is just learning, learning from each other. And how do we get there? Maybe, you know, reading literature, watching, you know, documentaries, listening, and most importantly, I think interacting with each other. I think Raymond, you know, said volunteering, or I wasn't sure who said that, but yeah, volunteering and get to know each other better, and the different, you know, groups or people groups that maybe you've never reached out to before, to be able to just gain some understanding of their story again, and what makes them happy, what makes them hurt, and how can we truly be an ally and be able to change the hearts and minds, you know, of each other. I think it starts there, and then asking how we can help instead of assuming this is what I need to do to help you.
There you go. Yeah. Bobby?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It reminds me of, you know, many of us have heard the golden rule, right? Treat others the way that we want to be treated. But then what Priscilla just said reminds me of the platinum rule. Treat others the way they want to be treated. And usually when I say that, people ask, well, how do I know how they want to be treated? And I respond, ask them.
There you go.
Just ask them, how do you want to be treated? Do you want me to sugarcoat things? Do you want me to keep it real? What do you need right now to help move forward? And how do we move forward together? You know, Frantz Fanon said that each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. And when I think of that piece of advice, I believe that communities, no matter how we define them, must stand together for justice. So I say, on top of learning, join an organization and get organized with that organization for justice. And standing for each other means that one time I had to be approached by Lydia XZ Brown, who's an autistic API disability rights activist. And when she called me in, She taught me not to use the language of health or disability or disease when I was talking about structures of oppression, because doing so ends up overlooking and ignoring how oppression works. And it also erases and harms disabled, multiply marginalized people too. She taught me that disabled people are more likely to be sex workers, are more likely to be undocumented, are more likely to have been affected by war, famine, militarization, because white supremacy, colonialism, war, and occupation, they literally create and exacerbate disability. And we can see that in, some of our PI siblings whose island nations have been bombed out in nuclear bombs, and the type of disability and health issues that have been created by that, right? And it's not even necessarily about the language that we're using, but it's really about the values that we're espousing, and what analysis are we going to use to inform that work that we do, to inform our political demand and our political visioning for what the future and what liberation must look like. And really, it's our turn, right? It's our turn to decide that saving the world is actually going to be our destiny. And it's our life's work, even if we might not see all the benefits of the spoils of our labor in our lifetimes. It's our life's work that we have to transform our country and our world in ways that no one has ever seen or imagined before. And anything less really is a cop-out. So, I have to ask, what's required of us today to do that, to make that lifelong commitment to learning, like Priscilla said, to being in right relationship with each other across our differences, so that we're not doing any more othering, but we're doing more belonging. We're creating belonging to build that social movement that we need to win. And I'll ask everyone in the audience today, what would you do today and for the rest of your life for the sake of seeing liberty and justice for all, not just in practice, and not just in theory, but in practice, in actual life? So really, it's our turn. We have to discover what our mission is going to be and whether we're going to fulfill it or betray it. And I challenge everyone to, let's get free together. Let's fight for freedom together.
Man, this is what happens when you get us together. See what happens? Raymond, did you have something to add?
Just a little more. I don't know if I can add any more to that. I think that's better than I could put it. Just want to kind of echo, learning, be open-minded. I know this kind of sounds cliche, but aside from the color of our skin, how we look, well, we're all just human beings at the end of the day. So be open-minded and learn from each other.
Yeah. I think that's the end of our planned questions, but I know we have the opportunity to ask each other on the panel questions, or even take questions from our listeners and audience members here. So by all means, if there's anything you wanted to ask each other, we can do that now.
I actually had a question. And this is actually for Priscilla, because she mentioned earlier about, all of the wonderful elderly adults that she was teaching to go out and explore the world and feel confident, traveling alone and things like that. And the fact that this pandemic and all the anti-Asian hate and anti-Asian violence that we've been seeing has really just derailed that confidence. So kind of regarding that, what does healing look like? What is it that we can do to really assure each other that we can make this community a safe place? And I know that's a big, broad question. I'm not really expecting you to be able to answer that. But I guess just in your mind, what does healing look like there?
Sorry. Hello? Okay, sorry, I just got a phone call, I had to mute. Yeah, that's a really good question. I ask myself that, what can I do to really help them, and what is it that they would need? I think practically speaking, if they felt safer after getting vaccinated, I think some of them have gotten vaccinated because they're elderly. So that has been great. And then I have heard of communities coming together and forming little walking groups with older adults. So I haven't quite dabbled into that and seeing how that is something that could be organized, to make that happen. And then I think once our agency gets the clearance to be able to do in-person instruction again, I'm just hoping I can get back out there and just spend some time with each person individually to build up their confidence again, and to say, I hear how you feel. I feel the same way too. Let's try this together. So maybe just taking some small steps. Do you all have any ideas?
I mean, I think I just believe that like getting into right relationship with people is really the key.
Mm-hmm.
And really getting to know each other. I don't know how often, having lived in the same home for 37 years, I've seen the change in how our old neighbors, we would hang out on the porch, front yard, in the garage. And today, the other homeowners that have come in, they drive into their garage with their automatic garage door openers and shut them and open and close them just like that. And you never actually see them. You see their cars go in and out of their homes. And we have to like get connected with each other for that shared humanity to really understand what each other's needs are, and really just start to care about one another. There's just a lot of responsibility that we can take for ourselves and for our communities, that would just really benefit from getting to know each other better.
Yeah, I think this is Priscilla. I think learning to listen to each other is something that needs to be practiced. I think listening with an open heart and open mind without any barriers or walls, I think is something that we all can learn to do better.
Yeah. I also happen to work at the California Department of Education, right? And I did some of my best learning by going to the California School for the Deaf and Blind, and like seeing just the transformational education that was happening there, both independent living and survival, but also enrichment and things like that. And just to be able to break these narratives, right, that that there's some sort of limitation, is so important, right? And to counter that narrative with the reality that like we can learn so much from each and every other person if we just take the time to ask the question, listen, learn, and go from there.
Yeah, and to start breaking those assumptions. I think we carry a lot of assumptions about each other, about people, things that we don't know, people that we don't know. And so to be able to come in with no assumptions, or be willing to break those assumptions and to be open to that, so we could start to change that narrative for each other.
Right. We have a question in the chat box from Dante Allen. He's actually one of our panelists from a previous talk that we've had. His question reads, in the US, race is too frequently characterized as a black and white issue. As an African American, I recognize that Black people, generally speaking, are reluctant to yield space, and recognize that people of color are often in the same boat. How can we better engage as a collective to leverage our shared and individual strengths to foster change? I think that's huge. I know one thing, I'm not I don't want to answer the question as a moderator, but having this whole model minority, moniker has not done us any favors on any end. It doesn't allow us to connect with other ethnic minorities in the community because they think we have special privilege. And then, on the other side, it's like, why are we privileged, or why are we given spots in colleges, or, it's one of those things that I think that has done us such a disservice. And, when you think you're lifted up as a model minority, that should be a benefit or an advantage. And I'm sure it is. I'll claim that I do have privileges, walking in my skin and, having the ability to speak English the way I do. I can claim those privileges, but I just want to say that that whole model minority myth has just not done us any services. So I'll just say from that stance.
I totally agree. I also want to correct myself. Earlier, I used the incorrect pronouns for Lydia XZ Brown. They used them, theirs. And so I apologize for that. And that's also just like a privilege, right? Like if the use of, as a cisgender male myself, right? Like I'm not necessarily, I use they, them, and my pronouns are they, them. But I get to sort of select whether, and it's fluid for me, whether I'm going to go in and out and argue for the he, him or not. But then I think going back to this idea that it's mostly painted in the black-white binary, right? Like that is a tool of white supremacy, right? To make it a black-white binary and no one else counts, and unfortunately it's also embedded in our systems by not disaggregating data for Asians and Pacific Islanders. What ends up happening is that it all gets painted under one monolith, one model minority, and we don't get to see the variance within the community. And then because of that lack of variance, we're not able to pull out the nuances and have that nuanced conversation. And so hence the conversation goes back and it reduces to black-white again. And that's what we need to, we need to push our structures, we need to push our hearts and minds to ask that extra question on, well, how would that other person see it? And also consider that part of that valid data that we need to include in our own analysis.
Raymond or Priscilla, do you have any thoughts about this that you want to share?
I think going back to finding our shared common themes, common stories, common experiences, so that we could, come together, I think, to build a bridge, I think, between different minority groups would be a good starting point. And, creating spaces for that to happen, I think would be excellent as well.
Well said. We have a few more questions. April, the Executive Director of Resources for Independent Living, asks, how can disability service organizations and the independent living movement as a whole be responsive to the AAPI needs post-COVID? So I just want to qualify this question with maybe a brief explanation of what independent living centers provide. Kaelea, do you mind doing like a brief primer on what independent living centers provide?
Yes, I was like, perfect place for me to jump in. So independent living centers, or ILCs, came out of the independent living movement, and it's just a way for people who identify as having disabilities to take their autonomy back, really, to have resources and supports available to them that are going to address the needs that they actually have that are not really addressed by systems. So for example, REL is a independent living center. We offer a variety of different services. We can connect people with housing, assistive technology, which is technology that, just any sort of technology that like helps you do something. Like glasses can be considered assistive technology, screen readers, wheelchairs, that's all versions of assistive technology. We have independent living skills classes, which if someone is sort of maybe youth join as well, but sometimes people who are a little bit later in life and are just starting the journey of living on their own. These skills classes can teach them how to manage their money, how to cook for themselves, like everything that you need to live and be in charge of your life. I think we are really working hard to move past sort of the I'm like trying to think of a way to describe it. But we're working really hard to move past this idea that because you are disabled, it means that you are less able to do anything. Like we can address these through different systems and different services, and that's what ILCs do. So yeah.
I know I'm a moderator, but I feel like I have an inkling as to how the independent living system works, and I have my thoughts on how it could be better structured. I know I love when independent living centers hire people who are proportionate to the communities that they serve. So if there's a lot of Spanish speakers in the community, employ more Spanish speaking employees so that you have people who can understand cultural references and how people typically, what makes sense culturally for them to avail of services. I think the movement is great regarding having various folks with disabilities work in the offices themselves. I've noticed that when I was working there is that the leadership is comprised of mainly folks who have disabilities themselves. So that's been great. But that extra effort to make sure that your staff just models after whatever the population looks like in your area is always good.
Yeah. Go ahead, Priscilla.
Oh, thank you. I think one way would be to see the person that is being served by the independent living service organization as a person, but also that they come with a family behind them or a community, that they live amongst. So although we're giving services to them to help that person become more independent and gain skills, but when they go back to their community, it doesn't mean that their community is going to accept them or see them as a valued member just because they gained those skills. So they may have changed, but the community hasn't accepted them in that way. So be able to provide services that are not just for the person, but for their community, and how can we support them to live in their community and to change the narrative within the community, so that that person who gained the skills can actually function and to utilize those skills. So I think that's one way. Another thing is, if there's staff that are, of a minority group, to be able to let them find their voice within the organization and to create space for them to be able to be creative with the way they provide services. That's culturally sensitive, or it is moving with the clients and their community space. So for example, we have a support group for just Spanish speakers who are blind,
right,
and like 20 members strong right now. And so being able to provide a space for them in their own language, in their own blindness disability. We have a support group for a Black American support group that just formed recently, in lieu of everything that has happened, to create a safe space for them. And, my dream is to really bring everybody together, and not be siloed, but to be able to create a platform or a space for them to be able to share together, to build some understanding, some bridges. So just being creative and being sensitive to what's happening around us culturally, and to be able to be a safe place, to be a light, in our community.
Absolutely, Priscilla. But those affinity groups are so important to be seen and to feel that you belong. So I totally get why it's getting so popular. We have another question. unless you guys wanted to continue with this other question.
I think really quick, I wanted to
Okay.
double down on the language justice piece, right? Like, language and the ability to access English is another marginalization that happens to a lot of APIs, right? Like,
Right.
for the Hispanic community, like they share Spanish, right? And they can speak Spanish, and so you can translate into one language. My union held an API event yesterday with 8 concurrent translations for our communities.
Wow.
Everything from Tibetan to Korean, and a bunch in the middle. And yet we still missed, I'm sure, some languages that can be covered. I've read and heard that in Asia and the Pacific Island nations, they speak over 2,300 languages and dialects, right?
Easily.
So,
I mean, it's 58 countries.
right.
So.
So we have to, I think that provides a lot of help, and helps break down those barriers. And I also want to add that private charity is not public justice, right? So for all our nonprofits, for all our wonderful people that are doing this work, like these are things that should be provided by our public entities, our institutions, and supported and funded and resourced, and it shouldn't just be out of our own private charity that we're providing these resources to folks to help remove barriers and marginalization. So that's all that I'll add to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby.
And this is Raymond. Just a little kind of bring both what Bobby and Priscilla said together. The language barrier for one, and having a space for different communities of color. So going back to my work at Disability Rights California as an advocate there. Quick overview, we are a nonprofit organization, and we provide free legal services to people with disabilities with disability-related issues. And everything on our website is translated into different language, or most, if not all of them. They are constantly being updated to translate into different languages, with Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Spanish, Arabic. There's a lot more than I could count off the top of my head at the moment. But everything is, if we can, it's translated. Everything, when we do outreach to outside in the community, the disability community, whatever language that they requested, we will find interpreters for, and for whatever clients that may call us, if we don't have staff that speak language, we have a language line that we use to make sure, clients calling us is able to share their issue, and we can serve them as best we can. And we have, going to Priscilla's, what Priscilla said, we're having a group for each of the communities of color. For our staff, I kind of mentioned this earlier, we have different employee resource groups. So the API employee resource group, it's a safe place for us to be able to share our story, our experience, and also to have our voice heard in the agency with leadership. So we can talk about how to hire or retain more staff of API. And especially when I was first hired, I was hired to reach to the API community specifically. So having more staff that looks like the community we're serving would make them feel more comfortable, and also bring an understanding that people who are not of that culture might not get. So kind of, for example, when my sister and I were growing up and we had to learn how to use a cane, we were living in Chinatown at that time in LA, and my mom was very adamant that we shouldn't bring it because she doesn't want, basically want people to stare at us, pity us. If you're not in that culture, you're not in the API culture, you might not understand why, the disability is shameful and being hidden away, and how to kind of, and may not understand why parents are involved with someone who's over 18 in their education or in their life, because as far as I understand in American culture, when you're 18, you're adult, you kind of speak for yourself, and people who are not of that culture might not understand why is your parents involved.
Thank you, Raymond. We have one more question in our chat box from Melissa O'Connell. Would options be welcome or available for social mixers or shared cause fundraising to help increase options for positive engagements? I would say yes. Make some food, I'll be there. I think as things are, getting easier, as people are getting vaccinated, people are more comfortable spending time with each other. I love going to an event, not, like when there's a Greek festival or a Mexican food festival, I'm there. I'm not Mexican or Greek, but, for me, I think food is my love language. So that's one way to connect with a culture.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I will also say though, right, like you can't just set up an event and like a mixer without relationships in place. Like those relationships should already be in place in order to like invite someone over. Successful events like that happen because you have both professional credibility as a trusted organization or group, but then personal credibility as well, that like, we know that we can trust you personally. And I think that goes both ways, right? So working through trusted messengers and things like that would be really helpful in order to make those kind of events bigger successes, I would say.
Bobby, I really liked what you said about trust, and I think we can only move as fast as the speed of trust. I don't know if that is even way to put it, right?
Yep.
And I think that can only come with, again, being able to have a bridge. Either it's a person, that you can trust, that can be that bridge builder. And I think that a whole event thing is a great starter, because you do have to start somewhere. There has to be a place to gather and to be able to bring people together. So, but beyond just bringing people together, what can we specifically do to build trust and understanding that's more intentional?
So the response from Melissa, she's saying, great, thank you. Hearing you, Robbie Roy, thank you. It's not something I've ever done before, and developing trust is a priority. Thank you for emphasizing the need. That's awesome.
And that speed of trust is actually Adrienne Marie Brown, right? Emergent leadership. So that's absolutely a key to make that happen.
We have a question from Jason Jong. So he's sharing a perspective. The onus should really be on the other social service /civic /arts and cultural organizations to be more accessible and inclusive in all ways. Yes. That said, forums like this seem to be extraordinarily valuable venues to expand connections and emphasize historical moments in solidarity with all marginalized peoples. 2 snaps to that one, yes. And then question for any panelist: whose work, other organizations or individuals, inspires you to continue reinforcing disability rights within culturally /linguistically specific spaces?
I'll say I'm fortunate enough to be aligned with a few organizations that really espouse this racial justice, cross-racial solidarity like message. SEIU Local 1000, which, like I said, they pushed for language justice. This 2-hour session on language justice and with ASL interpretation cost $20,000, right? Like that's a heavy lift to make that happen, and yet they've committed to that. They've dedicated the resources to make that happen for all of our events, that they're going to provide multiple language translation at the same time. The People's Collective, similarly, we include our accessibility team and crew. And then at the California Department of Education, where I work, we sit in this very unique space as a state agency and as an educational agency. And so where we fall within the Rehabilitation Act and Section 508 means that we have to officially provide accessibility and not accommodation. And we talk about that in our meetings, like what the distinction is between accessibility and accommodation. That accessibility means we're providing all of that up front. No one has to ask for anything extra because it's just there. It's part of the culture. And nothing is considered extra. It's just part of the system, and it's how we operate. And I think that that's a beautiful thing, that if we can, promote that type of accessibility to everyone, then I think that will transform our world.
Yes, I love what you just said about, accessibility being not a forethought, versus an afterthought. I think a lot of times infrastructure is already made and like, oh, we got to put in accessible this or that now, and it's too late. But I think to be able to think ahead in whatever we're providing, if it's a website or a new building, think about access. And so recently I just been involved in a project it's called Link 21, and it's helping to build a better transit system for the Bay Area up to Sacramento. And I was really impressed by them because they approached, they approached us, people with disabilities, to be on, in a meeting and to talk about like what would access look like. And I was recently able to, do a little promotional video for them as well. And I was just really impressed with them putting that as at the forefront of their project.
I just put a few little organizations in the chat box. Disability Justice Culture Club, Disability Visibility Podcast, and Disability and Intersectionality Summit. Those are 3 resources that I love that are inclusive of disability conversations about the intersection of culture, LGBTQ community identities, just the whole gamut. And so one is an event. The Disability and Intersectionality Summit has just passed in early May. And then the Disability Visibility Podcast is led by Alice Wong, who is, I'd say, like our Cesar Chavez, and is an amazing leader, and that she has these amazing conversations with folks. And I learned so much just by, following along. And then Disability Justice Culture Club is a group of folks in the Bay Area that just kind of take on whatever needs to be taken on in the community when people aren't getting the accessibility that they need. And they're pretty awesome people too. So worth following. Just my 2 cents there. I think do we have any more questions that I missed, Kaelea? I think we're looking good. Any last thoughts that we want to share? I know we still have 15 minutes technically. Bobby?
I think I just want to say thank you to having me here. I'm relatively new to the disability justice space, and while I've always been empathetic and I never like opposed it, I also just didn't dive in as much as I've dove in recent years. And the reality that that there's just so much more to learn for me. And so I thank Raymond, Priscilla, Kyla, Kaelea, and the organizations that have put this together, because I've gleaned a lot from it again, and I will continue to learn, and I will also commit and recommit my solidarity with the movement and with you all as we move forward.
Thank you, Bobby. It's funny, I coined a term a few years back when people realize that they actually do have a disability, whether they realize it or not. Sometimes you could have a diagnosis that actually puts you in a category that you are technically disabled. I call that moment coming out of the medicine cabinet.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Kyla, and just everybody who, was part of putting this together. I too am really new to all of this just this year, and it's been on my radar, even though, all these different identities were part of who I was. I don't think I truly acknowledged it and how they really intersected until it was shaken up this year. So I'm learning a lot. So thank you for allowing me to listen in and to share.
Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite, and also thank you for everyone else who's kind of in the background, the captioner and interpreters as well.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you all for your insights. Well, I look forward to hopefully connecting more in person as things start to open. But I know in our community, sometimes this is the most accessible way for us to connect and share ideas.
Yeah.
So I hope that we don't make this the last conversation. I know we had another panelist unfortunately cancel at the last minute who was part of the deaf community. So I feel like we're missing some perspectives that we'll definitely get the next time.
Yeah. I would also like to go ahead and say a thank you as well. Just thank you for everyone for being here. To me, these conversations are so important for myself personally, because as someone who just really wants to be kind of an ally to all, you cannot do that before you have the information too, So it's like one of the building blocks to us really being able to understand each other, to support each other, to love each other, is getting to know each other. It's getting to know, like, what are your experiences, like, what are your challenges, what are your fears, what are your strengths, all of that stuff, and really learning each other as people and seeing each other as people, because just as there's so much diversity within the API community, the Black community, the disabled community, it goes on and on. Like, we all live at those intersections. I mean, I can't really think of one person, no person just has one identity. We all have so many. So there's so many ways in which we relate with each other, and then so many ways in which, like, each other's identity is completely unfamiliar to us. And it's just like, it's until we bridge those gaps and look at each other and look at you and see, I see you as a person and not just as an other, I feel like we all know that, like, not we all know, I should not say that. But one of the things that we're coming to learn is that we're understanding race as a social construct. We are, and I want us to also see disability as also a social construct as well, because you really, at the end of the day, are only as disabled as your environment allows you to be.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this is something that, like, the other day, this might've been a few months ago, learned about, like, the social model of disability, and was just like, it all makes sense now,
Right.
like, people have impairments, like, for example, like, my eyesight is pretty bad, to the point that I think if glasses weren't commonplace, like, that could be considered, a disability for me, but it's not, because everyone has glasses. They're pretty relatively accessible, especially in our community, so it's, like, really easy for me to, like, use that and be like, okay, well, now I'm a person who is looking at the world, and can see with my eyes just fine because of my glasses, but it's just like, without society having already addressed that for me, I wouldn't have that. So what we have to do, like, as a society, as a community, is find ways in which we can support each other and find ways in which we can take care of each other. Because then we don't have to other people or try to continuously throw labels on people that, like, is defining them in a way that they don't define themselves. We can just see each other as we are, like, as individual people with individual experiences, and who are as deserving of love as everyone else. Like, and so to me, these conversations are so important for me to have a place to really listen and to hear what everyone else is saying. And I'm just so grateful to all of you for being vulnerable, for sharing your experiences, for sharing your stories. Again, I'm thankful for April and Kyla for helping me get this together, for all the interpreters for making this an accessible space, as well as the captioner. Like, this is the work. This is the work that we're doing. And it's a start, but I can plan on continuing to build from here. And I hope that everyone takes this as a space to do so.
Thank you. Yes. I see April here on the screen. I'd love to give her some time to share if she's interested.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyla, and thank you, Kaelea. I just want to thank the panelists and the attendees, and again, thank United Way California Capital Region for partnering with us on this discussion. I certainly learned a lot. I've been taking notes the entire time because one of the things that I'm very cognizant of that I mentioned last time is that RAL, as much of the IL movement, is considered a very white-led movement, even though we would not have the rights and the opportunities for all people with disabilities without the contributions of people of color. And I am very cognizant of the fact that we have been a traditionally white-led organization with a majority minority staff. And there are a lot of things that we have had to come to grips with over the last year and a half to make sure that we're really walking the walk and talking the talk of this movement and making sure that all voices are heard. And so I certainly learned a lot of things that I didn't know tonight about the API community and about structural issues that you're facing and the language barriers that you're facing. And so I definitely am going to take this back to my team tomorrow and really think about, how can we incorporate some of the things that were brought up tonight in this webinar so that REL can come out stronger and more responsive to the community that we serve. So thank you so much for reaching to my heart and, challenging me to be a better leader and for us to be a more responsive service organization.
Cool. Well, with that, I think we have 6 minutes back in your in your time there. So everyone have a safe and lovely Memorial Day weekend. I hope that you get to enjoy all of the things that you enjoy over the summer. It's getting hot in Sacramento, so stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.